They have pagans, witches, traditional and non-traditional Satanists, as well as skaters. They have skinheads, freaks, pops. They've got everything under the sun that they're not truly understanding the relationships between each and every one of them, as well as which are criminal and which are not criminal. Who's violent, who is not, who can be expected to turn violent. Someone necessarily calling themselves a Satanist isn't necessarily so.
It's a new era for law enforcement, just like when drugs started, it was new. Computer crime is new. People are starting now to realize that there is something else out there. A lot of cases are being reopened because of that.
Well, I've been a police officer for 15 years, and probably during that entire 15 years, I have seen things which we now label as ritualistic in nature, but never recognized it.
One young woman's body was found, what appeared to be a brutal rape case that culminated in the stabbing of the victim, was left by law enforcement agencies that way, with no further clues. However, upon her chest was Z-E-N across her chest in her own blood. It made no sense to them. It made no sense because they're not Satanist. That Z-E-N is the name of a demon, and his name is not Zen, by the way. It is Zad-In, Zadin. And that demonic entity is who she was sacrificed to, and had they known that, it would have led them in the direction of searching for a Satanist.
The most frightening fact of all is that Satanists today have encroached into every level of society, a dangerous and unseen force.
Lawyers, politicians, police officers, and it's just very shocking at how many police officers, how many officials are actually practicing Satanist. And this is one of the other problems that we have in dealing with the crimes, is the crimes themselves are snuffed out. They're hushed up. Or if a crime is known to be in progress, it's very difficult to get anybody to respond to it because of things that are blocked within the judicial system.
By Satanists?
By Satanists.
These people are in every strata of society. We're talking doctors, we're talking lawyers, we're talking a lot of Christian ministers who preach a sermon perhaps on Sunday morning and are involved in satanic rituals the night before. We're talking elders and Sunday school superintendents. I'm mentioning the cases that I am aware of. And as you've studied this yourself and read the literature, you know that people at every level and every profession, successful business people, psychologists, doctors, law enforcement people, are involved in this kind of thing. It's unnerving.
We've had notes written about Satan on walls in schools. You know, that my God's better than your God and all this. We had one note, you're welcome to a bloodbath ritual. Be there at 11:54 for the gatekeeper of hell to appear. Bring your set clothes or black sheets. This is what's going on in basically the schools. Usually, it's very secretive. As far as the kids go, you know, they don't know anything. They haven't done anything. Parents usually think, my kid just going through a phase.
Invited to a party, he couldn't believe that it had happened to him. Well, how could someone so nice and someone so cool really want to be his friend? You see, it started out just talking about power that comes from within. Soon pentagrams, satanic metal jams, and the evil to no end. 'Cause they're caught in the satanic web. And just like a spider, he has trapped them. They try to run and break free, but to no avail.
In the beginning, Satanists will entice a recruit with these three promises: power, drugs, and sex. Most teenagers recruited into Satanism are boys, drawn by the violent images and rituals and by the fear they can cause in others. Yet without heavy involvement in drugs, most of these recruits would not be able to go on.
Most of the time, like I said, there's drugs involved. Just because you're taking drugs does not necessarily mean you're into Satanism. But 9 times out of 10, Satanists are into drugs.
I have not seen in my practice any adolescent who have gone to the cult activity without using drugs.
As a non-traditionalist begins to get deeper into drugs and more deeper into his known craft and seeking after the powers, he loses sight of reality completely. You're no longer dealing with human beings as you and I know them.
Yvonne Peterson tells this tragic story of one girl who committed a heinous crime in the name of Satan.
And I think parents need to hear this, that she needed somebody to talk to, and her parents were too busy. She was the oldest of 6, and she was their babysitter, their dishwasher, and their house cleaner. And they didn't have time for her. I'm going to call her Diane for the book, okay? And that's not a real name, but she was a very intelligent, pretty little girl of 12 years old. She went to a party and she met a young man, which we'll call him Steve, okay? He's 16. And Steve told her he would listen to her and he would pay attention. Now this is not fiction. This isn't something I read in a book. I sat with this little girl as she cried her eyes out, as she walked through the memories of the past 2 years, the things that she had done to her and had to do to other people. He told her, I'll listen to you. And he gave her a marijuana cigarette. And they went outside and sat under the tree and they talked. And then he began to tell her how pretty she was and how much he needed to be around her and how fascinating she was. And all he did was show love and attention, which every teenager in America craves from their parents. And so if they're not there, then those Satan, well, the average time a father spends with his kids is 3 minutes a day. That's sad. 3 minutes a day.
That's incredible.
And so he told her, Steve told Diane, I'll take care of you, we'll be boyfriend, girlfriend. And they developed their relationship over the next 6 months. He also developed her drug habit because now she was hooked on cocaine. Okay, at the end of this 6 months, he told her that he was a Satanist priest and that she was being recruited and that she would be initiated into his coven of Satanists. She kept a diary. At one point, she said, "Where has that innocent child gone? Will I ever know her again?" Speaking of herself. Her tragic notes all throughout her diary, both of her spiritual bondage and her physical bondage to the addiction. And she said she would lay in bed at night and she would hear them chanting and calling her back to the circle. And then on August the 1st, 3 years ago, she was led into a cemetery. And if I might have your permission, I'd like to read from her hand the memories of that night.
Please do.
I found out that we were having our cult ceremony in the cemetery. That wasn't as shocking as when I found out that Steve and me were going to be married into the cult. Anyway, it was fantastic. The moon was perfectly round and it wasn't even cold. By the black candles, which were primarily used for light, we went through the ceremony of eternal slavery to each other. We cut our tongues and we let the blood pour into each other's mouths. It was nirvana. We were one blood, one being. Rosalie passed the sacred vial around and we performed the ritual of extending ourselves. Bright colors and lightning flashed streaks through the sky. Sometimes the colors exploded like rockets on the 4th of July, both in and out of our head. When the chanting started, they brought in a little baby. He was barely walking. I tied him to a nearby tomb. It was crying. After it was tied down, Chris took out his sacrificial dagger. I held back the baby's head while he cut it from the base of its neck down to its waistline and across the stomach. The baby was still alive, so I broke its neck by just about twisting it off. I hate myself so bad now. I helped in the killing of a baby. Animals made me sick enough and made me feel quite horrible. But a baby, my God, that was someone's child. I know now that I am truly horrible. No punishment I have ever had in the past could even begin to measure the type of punishment I need. I wish it could have been me they killed. My life isn't worth anything anymore. I've taken away someone's right to live. She's 14.
And I'm mainlined with Satan. when I was 21 years of age. And I came out at age 28, but I was a Satanist high priest for 4 years. Now, during that particular time period, I remember very little as far as details are concerned. I don't remember even graduating from high school, although I know I did. Why don't I remember it is the fact that drugs were involved, and the need to escape, the need a person has to have to escape the realities of what they have been involved in. And I took what I called clean drugs. They were pharmaceuticals. Not that it really matters any, but I was hooked on Percodan, Valiums, Libriums, and just plain alcohol. I would take an average of 60 to 80 milligrams of Valium in a day's time with about 40 milligrams of Percodan and wash it all down that night with 2 or 3 vodka Collins. I was a functional addict.
Drugs, sex, power. These are the enticements Satanists use to lure teenagers. Another is music, specifically heavy metal or black metal.
I think music has always been a powerful media all the way through. I mean, music was important to you and me, and it's important to the teenagers today. And we're not anti-heavy metal, but we're anti the heavy metal message that is causing death and destruction. And the symbols that they're using are so blatantly occultic that it's very difficult for us to overlook that kind of thing. For instance, if we take the album cover from Slayer's album, Rain and Blood. It depicts a message to young people that maybe consciously they don't receive, but subconsciously they're receiving this message. On the front of this album cover, Satan is depicted as a goat, which is very familiar to the Satanists. They know that that would be, the goat would represent Satan. And he is seated on a wooden throne. And the wooden throne is being supported by 2 people. Now, in the hand of this goat is a decapitated head. And of course, we're finding decapitated bodies all over America, and that is a common way for a Satanist ritual to occur, is to do the decapitation. And so he's holding this decapitated head, which emphasizes the bloodletting ritual and the murder. And then the throne is lifted up and being carried on the shoulders of 2 men. The man in the foreground is wearing a mitred hat, which we know to be the hat of a pope. And so that man represents organized religion or the church. Behind him is another man who is carrying the throne of Satan not only on his shoulders but across his neck, like the stocks would have him in bondage. And that man has horns and a forked tongue. And when you look at that, you think, oh, this is one of Satan's demons. And yet if you look carefully, his hands are very prominent in the picture, and they have nail marks in them. And the only man depicted throughout history with nail marks is Jesus Christ. And so what this thing is saying to them is that Christ and the church will support the rise of Satanism. And in addition to that, then there's the sea of blood that is flowing into a huge sea below Satan, that all the faces are down in the sea that he has taken captive and have become his victim. And the very in the forefront, there's a face that if you take that face and put it up against the face of George Washington, you'll see that they're almost the same. I mean, they're so identical. And so what we're saying here is that Satanism is going to take over our country, and that it is going to be brought in and supported by Christ himself and the organized church. That is blatant evangelization and propaganda being shared with thousands of young people through music. I think the greatest tool to desensitize America has been media in general, whether it is television, whether it's toys, games, or whether it is music. They all have played an important part.
They all carry a message, don't they?
Absolutely. And of course, in the life of the teenager, the 2 single most factors that we see is music and a game called Dungeons and Dragons. And then, of course, trailing very closely behind that and vying for the position is the amount of occult information that is put out through the videos, the movies, the TV shows. We went into a very small store, David. This was, I mean, maybe as big as we're sitting here. This was a small set. We found 119 videos on the occult. in one small store. And we have a video in America that is on our shelves that has been banned in 46 countries. And it was so popular it has faces of being 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in that video it shows everything that is